My name is Emily Carter, and for 30 years I lived under the suffocating delusion that if you just love your family hard enough, they will eventually love you back. I am an architectural designer. It's a career built on precision, patience, and understanding how much weight a structure can bear before it completely collapses. I spent my 20s working 80-hour weeks, surviving on cold coffee and blueprints, sacrificing my sleep to build something independent, something that belonged entirely to me. 5 years ago, I married Nathan. Nathan is a structural engineer, and from the moment we met, he became the bedrock of my life. He's the kind of man who notices the quiet shifts in my mood, the man who stands fiercely protectively beside me, and the only person who ever truly made me feel safe. Together, we weren't just a married couple, we were a team. For years, Nathan and I poured every spare dime, every weekend, and every ounce of our creative souls into one singular dream, our oceanfront penthouse in Malibu. We didn't buy it outright from a catalog. We bought a raw, dilapidated space on the coast and literally rebuilt it from the studs up. I designed the soaring glass walls that framed the Pacific Ocean. Nathan calculated the reinforced steel beams that held it against the coastal winds. It was valued at $2.4 million. It was priceless. It was our sanctuary, a physical monument to our hard work, completely untainted by my family's toxic influence. Because the truth is, outside of the home I built with Nathan, my life was defined by the shadow of my father, Richard Sinclair. Richard is a prominent, fiercely aggressive real estate mogul in the city, a man who measures human worth entirely by net worth and public perception. To Richard, people aren't family, they are assets to be managed or liabilities to be discarded. And then there was my younger sister, Bianca. Bianca is 25, a professional socialite whose entire existence is funded by our father's credit cards. She was always the golden child, the fragile princess who could do no wrong, while I was treated like the inconvenient oldest daughter who was put on this earth solely to solve everyone else's problems. Growing up, if Bianca threw a tantrum, I was forced to give her my toys. If Bianca crashed her car, I was the one expected to drive her around. Richard raised Bianca to believe that the world owed her everything, and he raised me to believe that my only value lay in what I could sacrifice for them. I built my career to escape that dynamic, but no matter how far away I ran, the invisible threads of familial guilt kept pulling me back into their orbit. I thought I had finally established boundaries, but I had no idea that Richard and Bianca were looking at my success, looking at my beautiful Malibu penthouse with a terrifying predatory envy that was about to shatter my entire world. The rot in my biological family ran deeper than anyone outside our circle could ever guess. To the public, Richard Sinclair was a self-made titan, a philanthropic visionary, and a doting father. But behind closed doors, he operated our family like a crooked bank, and I was the account he constantly overthrew. 2 years ago, Bianca managed to rack up a staggering $45,000 in credit card debt. She hadn't spent it on emergencies or medical bills. She had blown it on designer handbags, VIP bottle service at exclusive clubs, and first-class flights to Europe to maintain her superficial Instagram aesthetic. When the bills finally caught up to her, Richard didn't lecture her about financial responsibility. Instead, he called me into his wood-paneled office, poured himself a glass of expensive scotch, and looked at me with cold, demanding eyes. "Family stands together, Emily," he had told me, his voice carrying that familiar manipulative weight. "Bianca is young. She made a mistake. If the media or my business associates find out she's being sued by collection agencies, it hurts the Sinclair name. You have the savings. You pay it off, and I'll ensure you're taken care of in my will." Nathan had begged me not to do it. He reminded me how hard we were working to fund the ongoing construction of our Malibu penthouse. But the toxic conditioning of my childhood was a powerful drug. I wanted my father's approval so badly. A pathetic part of me still craved his love. So, I wrote the check. I wiped out $45,000 of my personal savings to bail out my sister. Do you know what Bianca did when I handed her the receipt proving her debt was cleared? She didn't say thank you. She didn't even look up from her phone. She just sighed, complained that the stress had given her breakouts, and walked out of the room. That was the false promise of family solidarity. I was the giver, and they were the bottomless, ungrateful takers. After that sacrifice, Nathan and I drew a line in the sand. We poured all our remaining energy into finishing our sanctuary, our oceanfront penthouse. It became our absolute obsession. Every beam, every piece of custom marble, every light fixture was bought with money we earned without a single dime of Richard's wealth. When it was finally completed, we vowed it would be our fortress of solitude. Then came the invitation. It arrived in an ornate, heavy black envelope embossed with gold foil. Richard was throwing a massive, over-the-top gala for Bianca's 25th birthday at the most exclusive country club in the city. He wasn't just throwing a party, he was staging a production. He bragged to the local papers that over 500 elite guests would be in attendance, including major real estate developers, city politicians, and high society influencers. It was a massive networking event masked as a birthday celebration. The moment Nathan saw the invitation, his engineering mind sensed a structural flaw in the entire setup. He looked at me across our kitchen island, his expression dark with worry. "Emily, don't go," he pleaded gently, placing his hands on my shoulders. "Your dad only invites people when he wants to show them off, or when he's planning to use them. 500 people? This feels like an ambush. Let's just send a gift and stay at the penthouse." I looked out at the peaceful Pacific waves crashing beneath our balcony, feeling a deep sense of dread pooling in my stomach. But I convinced myself that missing my only sister's milestone birthday would create an unfixable rift. I wanted to believe that for once it was just a party. "We'll go for 2 hours, Nathan," I insisted, trying to soothe both of our anxieties. "We'll shake hands, wish Bianca a happy birthday, and leave. I just want to keep the peace." It was the single worst decision of my life. The grand ballroom of the country club was a suffocating sea of black and gold. Crystal chandeliers hung low from the gilded ceilings, casting a sharp artificial glare over the 500 guests who filled the room. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, clinking champagne flutes, and the low collective hum of high society gossip. When Nathan and I arrived, I felt an immediate icy weight settle into my chest. I was wearing an elegant deep red lace gown, a dress I had chosen because it felt sophisticated and strong. Nathan stood beside me in a sharp charcoal suit, his hand firmly resting at the small of my back, anchoring me to reality. As we navigated through the crowd of politicians, local developers, and influencers, I spotted my father, Richard Sinclair, standing near the center of the room. He was dressed in a pristine, custom-tailored tuxedo, holding a glass of aged scotch, laughing loudly with a city councilman. Beside him stood Bianca, looking like a manicured doll in a shimmering navy blue dress, her diamond necklace catching the light every time she tossed her hair. They looked like the picture-perfect image of American royalty. But the moment Richard's eyes locked onto me, his laughter died. A predatory, calculating look flickered across his face before being instantly replaced by his practiced public smile. He walked over, his stride dominant and unyielding. Bianca followed closely behind, a strange, triumphant glint in her eyes that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "Emily, you made it," Richard said, his voice booming so the nearby guests could hear. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I was doing. He barely spared a glance at Nathan. "And in red, bold choice, make sure you don't wander off tonight. I have a major announcement later, and I need my eldest daughter right by my side. Happy birthday, Bianca," I said, handing her a small, beautifully wrapped box containing a delicate gold bracelet. Bianca barely glanced at the box, tossing it casually onto a nearby waiter's silver tray. "Thanks, Emily," she purred, her eyes scanning my red dress with an odd, unnerving intensity. Though honestly, I'm much more excited about the real surprise Dad told me about. You really outdid yourself this time. Before I could ask her what on earth she was talking about, Richard cleared his throat loudly, checked his gold Rolex, and patted my arm with a heavy, controlling hand. Enjoy the champagne, kids. The show starts in 20 minutes. As they walked away, Nathan leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear. His voice was laced with an intense protective urgency. Emily, we need to leave right now. They are looking at you like wolves looking at a lamb. Something is incredibly wrong here. Nathan, please, I whispered back, my heart hammering against my ribs. There are 500 people here. My dad's entire business network is in this room. He wouldn't dare pull anything crazy in front of a crowd like this. I was so naive. I didn't understand that to a narcissist like Richard Sinclair, a crowd of 500 people wasn't a deterrent. It was a weapon. Exactly 20 minutes later, a sharp chime echoed through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. The lights dimmed and the spotlight focused directly on the main stage where a massive black and gold balloon arch framed a banner that read, "Happy 25th birthday, Bianca." Richard walked up the steps, taking the microphone from the stand. The room fell into an obedient, respectful silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and esteemed colleagues," Richard began, his voice echoing flawlessly through the hall. "Thank you for joining me in celebrating my beautiful daughter Bianca's milestone birthday. As many of you know, the Sinclair family believes in legacy. We believe in building foundations. And tonight, we are going to witness a historic act of family devotion." Richard turned his gaze toward the crowd, the spotlight tracking his eyes until it landed directly on me. "I want to call my brilliant eldest daughter, Emily, up to the stage," Richard announced, his smile wide and menacing. A polite wave of applause rippled through the 500 guests. Nathan gripped my hand, his knuckles turning white. "Don't go up there, Emily," he muttered under his breath. But hundreds of pairs of eyes were staring at me. The social pressure was a physical force pushing me forward. I gently pulled my hand from Nathan's grip, whispering, "I have to," and walked toward the stage, my red dress trailing behind me. As I stepped onto the stage next to Bianca, Richard wrapped a heavy arm around my shoulders, pulling me tightly against his side. The warmth of the spotlight felt suffocating. Many of you know that Emily and her husband recently completed a magnificent state-of-the-art oceanfront penthouse in Malibu, Richard said into the microphone, his voice dripping with false pride. A true architectural marvel. But what you don't know is that Emily has decided to make the ultimate gesture of sisterly love. Tonight, in front of all 500 of you, Emily is officially gifting the entire $2.4 million Malibu penthouse to her sister Bianca as a permanent birthday sanctuary. The ballroom erupted into thunderous applause and gasps of amazement. Bianca gasped in theatrical, rehearsed surprise, clapping her hands to her mouth as she stepped forward, reaching into her elegant clutch to pull out a thick manila folder. They were legal property transfer documents. My mind went completely blank. The room spun. The roaring applause felt like a physical assault. I looked down into the crowd and saw Nathan standing frozen, his eyes wide with absolute horror. My father hadn't asked me. He hadn't consulted me. He had used his wealth, his prestige, and a crowd of 500 elite witnesses to publicly trap me into giving away the home Nathan and I had bled for. It was a legal and social ambush designed to force me into compliance because he believed I would never have the courage to publicly humiliate him back. The thunderous applause rolled over the stage like a tidal wave, but inside my head there was only a deafening, suffocating silence. Bianca was already stepping toward me, her eyes gleaming with a sickening triumph as she thrust the property transfer documents and a sleek gold pen into my hands. Richard's heavy arm was still clamped around my shoulder, his fingers digging into my collarbone with a subtle warning pressure that clearly said, "Smile, sign the papers, and play your part." They thought they had engineered the perfect trap. They thought that because I had always swallowed my pride, always bailed Bianca out, and always kept the peace to protect the family name, I would surrender our $2.4 million sanctuary just to avoid making a scene in front of 500 of the city's most influential people. But as I looked down at those legal documents, something inside me didn't just bend. It violently snapped. I thought about the 80-hour work weeks. I thought about Nathan's calloused hands from helping install those steel beams. I thought about the $45,000 I had already thrown into the black hole of Bianca's greed. I leaned directly into the microphone attached to the podium. "No," I said. My voice wasn't a scream. It was a cold, sharp blade that sliced right through the roaring applause. The clapping died instantly, starting from the front row and rippling back until the entire grand ballroom was dead silent. Richard's grip on my shoulder tightened until it bruised. He forced a deep, booming laugh into his own microphone, trying to salvage the moment. My eldest daughter always loves a bit of dramatic suspense. She means... I mean exactly what I said, Richard, I interrupted, stripping away the title of father entirely as I stared directly at him. No, I am not signing these papers. I am not gifting my home to Bianca. My husband and I built that penthouse with our own sweat and tears, independent of your money, and it will never belong to her. A collective horrified gasp sucked the air right out of the room. 500 high society guests froze. Richard's public mask shattered in a microsecond. The fake benevolent smile vanished, and his face contorted into a deep purple rage. His fragile narcissistic ego had just been completely obliterated in front of his entire business network, his political allies, and the local media. "You ungrateful little bitch!" he snarled, his voice a low, vicious hiss that picked up on the live microphone. Before I could even take a step back, Richard completely lost his mind. He snapped. Abandoning every ounce of his public decorum, he lunged at me. His large hand flew forward, wrapping firmly around a massive fistful of my hair at the back of my head. With a brutal, primal yank, he pulled me backward off balance. I let out a piercing, agonizing scream as my feet slipped out from under me. The force of his rage slammed me violently onto the hardwood floor of the stage. Nearby tables shook from the impact. A tray of expensive crystal wine glasses shattered to pieces right beside my head, spraying dark red liquid across the floor like blood. "You will do exactly what I tell you to do," Richard roared, completely untethered from reality, pinning me down by my scalp as I wept from the blinding, burning pain in my head. I lay there on the cold, hardwood floor, my elegant red lace dress torn, my cheek pressed against the polished wood. My vision was blurred with tears of physical agony and profound humiliation. I looked out at the sea of 500 guests. Do you know what they did? Nobody jumped onto the stage. Nobody ran to pull him off me. Instead, dozens of my own relatives, colleagues, and prominent city figures slowly raised their smartphones. The flashbulbs began to blink. They were recording my assault, capturing my deepest trauma just to upload it online. As I lay there sobbing, watching those flashing lenses, and seeing Bianca standing over me with a cold, satisfied smirk, a profound transformation occurred inside my chest. The crushing sadness and the desperate, lifelong craving for my father's love evaporated into thin air. In their place, a freezing, calculated, and absolute determination took root. The weeping victim died on that ballroom floor. I realized that being kind was a liability. I wiped a tear from my eye, looked up at my monstrous father, and silently vowed that I would use every law, every resource, and every single video recording in this room to completely destroy his reputation, his wealth, and his entire empire. Richard's tyrannical hold on my hair didn't last another 3 seconds. Before he could drag me an inch further across the stage, a roaring shadow collided with him. It was Nathan. My husband had sprinted up the stage steps, bypassed the stunned security guards, and tackled Richard directly off me. Nathan slammed my father hard against the gold balloon arch, pinning the heavy millionaire to the ground with a strength fueled by pure protective fury. "Don't you ever lay a hand on my wife again," Nathan bellowed, his voice rattling the chandeliers. With one hand keeping Richard securely pinned against the stage floor, Nathan used his other hand to pull his phone from his suit pocket. He didn't hesitate. He dialed 911, shouting into the speakerphone over the chaos of the room. "Emergency. I need a police dispatch immediately at the Grand Crest Country Club. A woman has just been brutally assaulted on stage in front of 500 people. Send backup now." Richard was pinned, his custom tuxedo covered in spilled wine, but his arrogance remained unchecked. He screamed threats up at Nathan, his face twisted in rage. "Do you know who I am? I will ruin you. I will buy your firm and fire you by morning. Get off me!" He was completely blind to the fact that his microphone was still active on his lapel, broadcasting his unhinged, violent threats to every single person in the room. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted from shocked silence to absolute panic. Within 10 minutes, the sharp wailing sirens of the local police department cut through the night. Red and blue emergency lights flashed through the towering glass windows of the country club. 6 uniformed officers stormed into the ballroom, their boots echoing heavily on the floor. The wealthy guests, suddenly terrified of being implicated in a high-profile domestic violence scandal or appearing on a police report, completely changed their tunes. They didn't protect Richard. To save their own reputations, they immediately turned their smartphones over to the officers. Dozens of people stepped forward, eager to provide eyewitness statements and hand over crystal-clear, high-definition video recordings of Richard dragging me by my hair. The officers walked up onto the stage, pulled Richard to his feet, and forced his hands behind his back. The sharp click of the metal handcuffs echoed through the PA system. Richard Sinclair, the untouchable real estate mogul, was marched out of his own daughter's gala in handcuffs, completely disgraced in front of his entire business network. Bianca was left standing alone under the bright stage lights, clutching her useless property documents, screaming hysterically as her milestone birthday bash collapsed into a chaotic crime scene. Nathan helped me up from the floor, wrapping his jacket around my torn red dress, and held me tightly as the paramedics checked my scalp. "We are going to make them pay for this, Emily," he whispered fiercely into my hair. "Every single bit of it." We didn't waste a single second. The very next morning, while Richard was sitting in a holding cell waiting for his arraignment, Nathan and I hired the most ruthless, aggressive corporate and criminal attorneys in the state. We refused every single frantic, manipulative phone call from Bianca and my father's legal team, begging us to drop the charges for the sake of family. Instead, we handed the district attorney over 50 unique cell phone videos of the assault. We ensured Richard faced the maximum possible charges under U.S. laws for aggravated assault, domestic battery, and public endangerment. But we didn't stop at criminal charges. Because I was an architectural designer who had worked close to Richard's real estate developments, I knew where his financial skeletons were buried. My attorneys launched a massive, comprehensive audit of the Sinclair estate as part of our civil lawsuit for damages. We uncovered years of hidden shell companies, offshore accounts, and severe financial irregularities designed to fund Bianca's lavish lifestyle while evading taxes. We systematically packaged every single bank ledger and fraudulent transaction document we found and mailed them directly to the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. We didn't just want my father in a jail cell. We wanted to completely dismantle the financial empire that gave him the power to abuse me in the first place. The hammer of justice fell harder than my biological family ever thought possible. 6 months after that fateful night, we stood in a federal courtroom for the final sentencing. The viral videos of the assault, combined with the mountain of financial fraud evidence we handed over to the IRS, left Richard completely defenseless. The judge looked down at my father with absolute disgust, completely unmoved by his wealth or high society stature. Richard Sinclair was sentenced to a significant prison term for aggravated domestic battery, alongside millions of dollars in fines and back taxes that forced his real estate empire into immediate liquidation. Bianca's world collapsed right along with his. With Richard's bank accounts frozen and his business assets seized to pay off the federal government, her endless stream of funding vanished overnight. She lost her luxury apartment, Her high society friends abandoned her the moment she became social poison, and she was forced to move out of the city entirely. As Nathan and I walked out of the courthouse steps on that final day, a frantic, disheveled voice called out my name. I turned around to see Bianca running toward me. The designer clothes were gone. She looked exhausted, terrified, and desperate. "Emily, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face as she tried to grab my arm. "The banks took everything. Dad is going to prison, and I don't even have enough money to pay next month's rent. You have to help me. We're sisters, Emily. You're living in that multi-million-dollar penthouse. You can't just leave me with nothing." I looked at her. For 30 years, that voice would have filled me with a crushing, manipulative guilt. But as I stared at her now, I felt absolutely nothing. She wasn't my sister. She was just a stranger who had stood by and smiled while I was brutally assaulted. I calmly stepped back, letting Nathan place his arm around my waist, anchoring me. "My sister died the night you watched our father drag me by my hair and did nothing but reach for a property deed," I said, my voice dead calm. "Never contact me again." I turned my back on her cries and walked away, completely cutting the final toxic thread of my biological bloodline. That evening, Nathan and I stood on the expansive balcony of our Malibu penthouse. The cool, crisp Pacific breeze brushed against my face, carrying the scent of salt water and absolute freedom. Below us, the endless ocean waves crashed against the shore, and the sun was setting over the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of deep orange and purple. This home was ours. It was safe. It was earned. And it was entirely untainted by the greed and violence of the family I left behind. I looked over at Nathan, who was smiling gently as he handed me a warm cup of coffee, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt a deep, unshakable peace. I had lost a family, but I had gained my dignity, my freedom, and an independent life with the only person who had ever truly loved and protected me. If you want to know what happened when Bianca tried to retaliate, or how Richard's prison sentence completely changed our lives, click on the video on your screen right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family to save yourself? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next story.